But when I was in Costa Rica and I was talking about the gene keys at this community event, I was explaining, how it works and with human design and astrology and all this and that. And there were some people that were like overhearing me. And they were like, hey, I want to introduce you to someone, come to my house, blah, blah, blah. So I did get to meet people that had worked directly with Ra and trained under him for like very long time. And there have been several instances throughout my seeking of this knowledge where large libraries have been given to me.
Welcome back to another episode of Cultivating Change, everyone. I hope you're having a great day so far. I'm your host, Alex Corey, and today's guest is a very special guest. This is a good friend and former housemate, Danielle Rodenroth, founder of soulmapping.life. She is a human design coach. Human design is one of those fascinating frameworks where, from a Western, cynical, scientific reductionist frame of mind, like I come from, it seems pretty woo-woo on the surface, and like most systems that are based on quantum mechanics and have foundations in deep esoteric teachings, it's surprisingly accurate to the point where when I first started learning about it, it was obnoxious because Danielle was able to tell me about things without really having gotten to know me at all. And as we get into today's podcast, you'll understand why that framework is so powerful. She is a student of deep psychology and of constantly learning about herself and the mechanisms of existence themselves. I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. We could do another 3 or 4 after this, and we probably will, but this is a great journey into the jungle to find out how she came about to learn human design and take a deep dive into learning about herself and the mechanisms of existence. So, as we were talking last couple weeks ago, I realized that we've done all the education together and all the courses and more of the formal stuff, but I think your story of how you came to human design and to the ways that you know yourself are way more interesting than the actual, well, human design is pretty cool too, but how people get there, because it's such a specific thing.
Right.
Not in Nashville, apparently. I've met 3 other people who do it, but it kind of just falls out of the sky onto people, it sounds like. And I know yours was in the jungle, and I don't think I've ever gotten the full story of it. So how did you get to the jungle, and how did that fall into your lap? I'm sure it was during some other interesting hero's journey, heroine's journey.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for wanting to do this interview. And, it's always interesting because, that other big podcast I did where, I talked to a bunch of people on that huge live and everything, and they asked me questions about myself, and I probably gave them 2 sentences, and they were like, okay.
With JC?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, so this should be interesting to go into that.
Information is so, most people just want the information.
Yeah.
But I've gotten the information for a good chunk of time, and it's such a deep rabbit hole, but it's not something you're like, oh, I had to deal with this health issue. Like, everyone's got a health story, and you also have a health story.
Yeah.
But human design is so specific, mostly because it's such a new framework.
Right.
As far as all-encompassing frameworks go. Sorry, go ahead.
No, definitely. Well, it's interesting because I guess I'll start kind of from the beginning. I come from a Air Force military family, went to private school. I was the youngest of 5 children. So for me to kind of end up where I'm at now was a little bit unexpected, especially with the path of like my family and all of that. But, when I was younger, I always knew something was like different about me. And I was like, all right, what's going on? When I was 10 years old, I bought the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, which is what they use to diagnose all psychiatric disorders. And my mom found me in my room with it because we had just gone to the bookstore, and she found me in my room with it, and she was like, "Oh my God, what is this? Maybe take it back." But yeah, I had always been into psychology, and then I got into like self-help, and I wanted to know why people do what they do and how they think. And when I was younger, I wasn't able to communicate super well, and I was very reactive and emotional, and just didn't really ever feel understood. And I think a lot of us have felt that way, but that's really what drove me down this path of like self-help, psychology. Then I got into a really interesting toxic relationship when I was in my early 20s, which continued the path down psychology, and I studied it in college, and just trying to figure out what was going on, and stumbled upon like Eckhart Tolle and Abraham Hicks and lots of different self-help teachers that kind of got me into this other view. It's like, okay, what's going on? And then I went down the whole pathway of the banking system with this job that I had.
Okay, I was going to be like, usually you don't jump from Eckhart Tolle and presence
To banking.
into banking. Usually there's something in the middle, but
Yes.
go for it.
Yeah, so I had this job where I was helping people with their finances, and so I wanted to be good at my job, and I started researching the banking system, which opened up the whole pathway for looking at all of the things in the world, right? So I learned about fractional reserve banking and, the Federal Reserve and all of these different things. And then, looked into the food system and into like all the systems, and was like, oh my God, what's going on in the world? At the same time, I was still developing my like spiritual understanding, got into astrology, my early 20s, started researching that and trying to figure out what's going on with that. Started studying the transits every day for probably 4 years straight.
That's a while.
Yeah, every morning I would be like, okay, what's going on? And I would look up different things for years. And I started my nonprofit in 2013 before I left to go to Peru. And one of my board members was a manifestor.
Hugs?
Yes.
Humans Unifying Global Solutions?
Right, yes. So I had found all the truths about our world systems and everything. And then I was like, oh my God, I need to leave the country. I need to get out of here. It's crazy. And I want to build something else. I'm just going to go build something better. And started the nonprofit. One of my board members was like, hey, I found this system. What's your birth info? And he pulled our charts. And I was like, what is this? Wait a second. Like, I'm not a manifester. Like what's going on with this?
That word gets so abused.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, in all the spiritual communities, which is one of the things I really liked about human design, which was just clarified what that
word means.
Meant. So, flip here.
Okay. Yeah. So he had pulled my chart, and then I didn't really have a lot of information on it, and I started just searching everything I could on the internet. And I was like, okay, there's lots of different information out there. It's not really organized. I can tell where the gatekeeping is. So I started,
design.
Yeah. So I started creating all these documents of compiling as much information about everything I could find and like distilling it down, outlines, and like trying to find the missing pieces. I left to go to Peru, and one of my friends, Dave, who lived in one of the houses that we had there, he's like this older guy who, is from England, and he works with like a lot of different projects and stuff, and we worked with him with human design, and he knew some of it, right? So we had like the mandala wheel painted on our house, and it was like part of the way that our group was working. Like we understood everyone's charts. And so, I just continued to do the searching. I reached out to several different websites that had the human design information. I was like, hey, we have a nonprofit. Like, we're trying to bring this to communities, and like, especially to like these other areas of the world, right? And like, how can we use this, and what resources are available? I kept hitting walls,
Right.
like everywhere I was, and I was like, why is this information like so like elitist, and even Ra talks about it like that. It's a very elitist system in the sense that you only have access to it if you come across on your fractal,
Right.
if you have the funds, blah, blah, blah.
Raz and Ra Uru Hu,
Yes.
the founder of Human Design.
Yes.
Channel.
So I was getting really frustrated, and I was like, you know what? This information really needs to get out there.
So multiple instances where it kept coming across, but there was no like exploration allowed, almost.
Right. Basically, a lot of these websites and companies were basically like, this is just how it is. Like, you have to pay, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, hold on.
Almost like a mystery school.
Yes.
Kind of like you need to prove that you have skin in the game or invest in order for them to give you the culted knowledge or something?
Sort of, but it's all money-based.
Okay.
It's not even like initiation-based or any of that. So yes, so I remember just being very upset about that. And I was like, why is this like, after I learned all this stuff with the corruption in the world, and then I'm like, oh, now we have, information. And I was working on like open source, everything.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And I remember just being like, okay, when I get the information, I want to share it, I want to give it, I want to like make sure that everyone has access to as much as possible. And so I started doing readings, for years for free, right? Just like any person I would talk to, and I would just show them the system and be like, hey, look at all this information, and get a bunch of people into it. And then fast forward a little bit more, I moved to Costa Rica, and I was like in the jungles. I was working with this community project, and I was talking about gene keys, right? The gene key system.
Richard Rudd stuff.
Yeah, because I had found that too, like along the way. Mm-hmm. And I had spent years so far, like combing everything in the internet, like trying to get.
So you didn't have any formal education, or
no.
Did someone just give you a library, or did you just get introduced to it and then have to just accumulate and piecemeal and grab everything yourself?
So that's a couple part answer. But when I was in Costa Rica and I was talking about the gene keys at this community event, and I was explaining, how it works, and with human design and astrology and all this and that. And there were some people that were like overhearing me, and they were like, hey, I want to introduce you to someone, come to my house, blah, blah, blah. So I did get to meet people that had worked directly with Ra and trained under him for like a very long time. And there have been several instances throughout my seeking of this knowledge where large libraries have been given to me. You know what I mean? And the information is starting to pour out on the internet, and, there are places where you can get it, and this and that. So I started just combing through it, distilling it down, continuing to do readings, talking to people that had trained directly under him, taking all the courses that were in all this information, diving into the cosmology portion. Right? Because human design is not just human design or relationships. It's like literally the design of how existence operates. And the human part of it is just like one sector.
Well, it's how it most applies to your everyday life,
right?
I'd imagine. But if you're working at the level of the neutrino ocean, it would kind of touch everything. And whenever I'm just giving people like a little brief download on it, I can't, because there's too much. I will, especially if I'm talking to some of my old IT friends or engineering friends, they'll have the same exact mindset as me, where they'll just go straight to the root and be like, what is this based on? And I'll be like, neutrinos. And they'll be like, oh.
Yeah.
And then they'll shut up.
Right.
Because then it's based in, you can go quantum physics, you can go normal physics, kind of just underlying fabric of everything.
Yeah.
Right. It gives it some weight.
And that's even why astrology works, right? And like, I don't know if many astrologers know that, right, or understand that concept of it, but it really does explain how all of these systems operate and how we can look at it in regards to how we function individually and throughout life and all that. But yeah, and I did a lot of plant medicine and working with different indigenous people along the way too.
Costa Rica,
Peru.
Peru.
Yeah.
Is there another one in there? Ecuador?
I mean, Mexico, Colombia, I went to Panama.
Okay.
But
all of that panhandle.
yes, yes. But yeah, so I mean, I found all this information, and the people that gave it to me were like, this is, I guess, for you, and I don't know why or doesn't matter, but, basically I have been spending, 8 to 10 years now, just like combing through it, distilling it down, organizing all the information into, I don't know, 50 to 100 documents of.
There's a lot.
And making classes and readings.
There's so much information. There's so many angles at which you can approach it because it touches on all mechanics and existence. Like you said, there's too many points of entry.
Right.
And I'm sure you had a specific, like you said, the cosmology and astrology is a point of entry for a lot of people. Probably the most common, I would imagine, you think?
Yeah, I mean, most people are familiar with astrology.
Right.
I did have an interesting question brought to me yesterday, which was, hey, what are the most important parts of a chart? Or like, what are the biggest keys?
Give people an overview just quickly, since people might have no idea of what we're talking about, of what the body graph is, that inputting all your raw data will generate, and then just like 5-minute or less on the 4 types that we've mentioned.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then remind me to come back to that question because it kind of brings together what I've learned with everything. But yeah, so human design is the science of differentiation, which is how each one of us are a combination of 2 consciousnesses. We are a binary consciousness. We are like a formula, a machine, a vehicle, an organic filter that feeds on the neutrinos, right, in order to process consciousness and create our experience of reality, and that the universe is actually like a biverse. It operates in this illusion / truth binary that we're always able to see. So when we look at a human design chart, it maps out both of those angles, right? Like, okay, here's your truth. And this is like how you operate and all your mechanics down to how you need to make decisions, right? How you are in relationships, how you need to fuel your body, what's the correct motivation of your psyche, your biological form, right? And any issues that might be with that. What your channels are, or the mechanics that you have that you bring to any situation that are very unique to you, right? There's so many layers to it, even how you study, how you learn, how you perceive things. It's just, even how you perceive like spiritual phenomena, right? Like that can even be shown in that. And then the other side, right, is the other binary, the not self, the illusion, the conditioning. Like here's where you're open, here's where you're an empath, here's the specifics of what your mind has taken in that is now programmed. And it is actually your greatest wisdom and your greatest gift. But if we don't know that, then we just try to drive the life with that.
That's what I love about that.
Yeah, right. And it's like nothing is good or bad. It reframes our paradigms of our existence so we can clear all those distortions, right? The like good and evil, and the universe is not inherently moral. Right? And so we can start to see things in this other way. It shows us that the form part of our consciousness, the vehicle consciousness, which is everything that's not the mind, is intended to drive the life. And it's the same consciousness that makes your heart beat. You don't have to think about it. And the mind becomes the passenger, the researcher, the communicator, the translator, right? Becomes our friend rather than this aspect that drives us into suffering. Right? So in the basics of a chart, we can see that there are 4 main types of vehicles, meaning 4 different ways that a person can process the neutrino field, and it gives us their strategy, which is how they need to move through the geometry one decision at a time. So the aura type is telling us how you're receiving the neutrino ocean, which is this really abundant, most abundant subatomic particles that travel just under the speed of light, which is significant. They carry mass, which is information, and they interact with whatever they are passing through, meaning they're imparting information and taking information.
I like your analogy of the cars
Yes.
scraping each other,
Right.
just leaving a small imprint as they touch.
Right,
Yeah.
like the red car and the white car,
Yeah, just scraping
they
paint.
both have the same, now this one has red paint, that one has white paint.
Right.
When they pass. And yeah, I mean, that's really what the types are doing, right? We are each having our different roles, right? I'm a generator, which is the most common type. It's about 67%. And so I generate, when I'm correct, the movement, the resources, the satisfaction, the work, the, whatever it is that my vehicle needs to process, it will generate for me. Right? So if I'm in the incorrect alignment, I will degenerate, right? I'll be frustrated. I'll be on that other side of the coin, right? You're a projector, right? Which is about 22 to 25% of the population, about 1 in 5 people. And it's really, projectors are the newer vehicle that, because prior to 1781, right? 1781 was when we discovered Uranus. Prior to that, Saturn was the furthest planet that we knew about, right? So Uranus is correlated with what was going on at the time, the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution. It is all about Aquarian, right? This Aquarian age. The breaking free from the cycles of Saturn is what Uranus is meant to do. So we basically entered into a new era, a new time period, where we are now this interregnum species. We're an in-between species. We're actually a different species. I don't know if we were going to get into this in this call. We look exactly the same, but we are in a totally different ocean, a different world, a different, really a different vehicle that has a greater or a different potential for processing out consciousness, right? So our lifespan is different. Prior to 1781, Saturn, right, was the furthest planet, which takes about 30 years around the sun, right, around the cycle. So that was the average lifespan at that time.
Okay, so very, very interrelated with the universal particles making it through and interacting with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, back prior to 1781, if you were 14, 15 years old, you were getting married,
Right.
you already been working for years, you're starting to have kids, and you were lucky if you lived past 35, right? Like that was pretty rare. Now we're in this Uranian cycle, which is 84 years, right? So that's more or less the average lifespan around that. And so if we kind of take that, knowing that we're like in this different vehicle, we're not in the old 7 chakra system, hierarchical, old world, even though those ideas and thoughts and conditionings have still been imparted on today's life. We're actually in a different vehicle. The 84 years, half of that is 42, right? That's the midlife crisis, the half Uranus cycle. That is actually when we are like becoming an adult, right? Because it takes longer for our consciousness to mature because we're processing out quite a bit more.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm an adult yet. Most of the time I still feel like I'm a kid, where I'm just like, oh, I have responsibility, but there's so much life to get under your belt still. Like, I feel like I barely scratched the surface.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good to hear. I got 10 years for the halfway point.
Yes. So, it's just that we're in this new vehicle and that we're in this new era where we are approaching a major shift that's coming up, right? 2027. I don't know if we'll get into all that, but pretty much the projectors are the new type of vehicle. And, projectors aren't necessarily cut out for this world because it's a generator ruled world.
Right. This is the grind.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where another dilemma comes in. But if you know about your type like you do now, it's like there's a different way to approach things so that we can actually operate correctly and do what we're here to do, right? Which is to access our unique consciousness, right? Which requires us to disintegrate all of these conditionings and programmings that have been instilled, right? And that is in this world.
Which is as much work as anything else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes its own toll just breaking them down and peeling back layers.
Exactly.
So many layers.
Yes, yes. So, and then we have like the manifestors, which are about 10%. I like to think of them as like when the pyramids were created and, they would have been like the pharaohs and the ones kind of like manifesting into the world, meaning that they created the hierarchies, the religions, the laws, the systems that really they put in place so that they wouldn't be controlled, right?
Right.
But now we're in this generator world, and the projectors are the new vehicle. We have the manifestors still 10%, and about 1% to 2% are what we would call reflectors, which are completely open, right? All their centers are white. They do have gates in there that are like buttons that get pushed when the moon transits around the wheel, creating an angle for the neutrino to come through to activate in them, and then they get to see things on a cyclical, 13 times a year cycle.
Yeah.
Right. So
that must be a trip. I can't imagine. It would be like living a new flavor every day. No
Right.
day is the same.
Right.
That would be intense.
Yes.
Good way to live if you're in touch with the present and have someone taking care of your needs, but that must be the most difficult thing just to live.
Right.
If you don't know what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. That's their question for them is, who am I today?
Yep.
That's what they should be asking every day. And, they're lunar operated, which is different. Like the rest of us are the solar beings because there's a particular pathway that the neutrinos come to us. It's not just like they're flying through everything. There's like a pathway that it comes through to get to us, right? And that's part of the cosmology or the mechanical understanding of this machine, this kaleidoscope that we're in, and the transits moving through, the planets moving through, acting as filters, the white car, red car with the neutrinos. We are each on our own geometry receiving that. And this allows us for that potential to have a completely different experience of our life.
Right. That was a lot, yeah.
Are you going to cry?
Yep.
Oh, no.
That's fine. Keep going. It's good.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, and I mean, that's really the beauty of this, is that it gives us the language. It gives us the things that we know, we feel, even spiritual sciences and religions, we are always trying to label and create our understanding and our meaning of like what God is and what our life is meant to be and all these things, and this is really a science that shows us precisely all of the languaging, right? All the understandings of each thing, so that now we can not take things as personal, and we can start to really have this unique, completely self-aware experience where we take in this information instead of going to that binary of like straight into programming, straight into illusion, which is where most people are. Like when we talk about being asleep, or the normies, or the the NPCs, like that's what that is, right? It's they haven't broken free from the clutches of the program, and it's not just a vague matrix-like analogy, right? This is like a true understanding that we have the precision to be able to explain about, right? And that's why I got so into this, because I'm like, oh my God.
That's why I like it so much. It's so precise,
right.
so individual.
Yeah.
Whenever I try to just give a brief overview, it's hard to not have it be dismissed because there's only 4 types, and people are like, they give you the look like I'm more complex, and I go, but, and then it's infinitely deep.
Right.
Right. So just because it's a typology and there's only 4 types doesn't mean that it's not the most complex thing that you will ever come across.
Exactly.
The journey of knowing yourself is the most hard thing,
Right.
I think, to do.
Yes.
Because you are the most complex thing in existence.
Exactly.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yeah, which is why I break out into emotion, because it's the study of infinite potential and almost your purpose with barriers that you put in your own way almost.
Right.
Kind of the progression of life that is always there regardless of career or any of the other major decisions. That you cannot escape that.
Right.
And is constantly with you, but it is so rewarding if you figure out just a little bit.
Yeah.
Like how to reduce the resistance. And if you think about resistance I've been doing Tai Chi, so everything is now in electrical terms. So that's the way that's been helping me. Thinking about neutrinos or just subatomic particles is just everything as electricity. And we have an electrical body. So reducing resistance, ohms, increasing current, voltage is a whole another subject. But before I forget, what did your client ask you?
Yes. So he asked me, what are the most important key points in a chart, or what are the most important gates or whatever. And my answer was, because over the last several years of working with all these systems and integrating and synthesizing and all of that, what I've realized is that actually it doesn't matter, even wherever you look in a chart, you start to see the same themes, like anywhere. And that's kind of, like what I've seen, like you can hone in on certain gates and like expand upon it. And it's like a fractal, like everything in the chart is a fractal, and you start to see how it all like interweaves. I mean, we're incredibly, completely unique, and we have all these facets, right, of our aspects and the angles, right? But they all relate together, and that's the whole thing, is being able to see the whole picture. You can zoom in on one part and look at it and be like, okay, that makes sense. Let me focus on that to see if that's a good doorway for me to access more consciousness and like have more awareness of that thing, and then like zoom out and look at how it plays with everything else. But yeah, back to what you were saying with like the electrical stuff. All of this comes down to like frequency.
Right.
And even in human design, we practice our strategy and authority, which is how we align correctly to that binary, right? The false and the truth, right? It's all chemical.
Right.
It all comes down to our systems in our body and our chemicals, and it's like a chemical change, a physical change in your body, which is it's electrical impulses and like the chemicals and all of that. So yeah, it's very grounded in that sense.
Right. And that's why I love the analogy, is because you can feel that usually, or if you're, once my mindset got that, it became easier to understand my energy levels through, like whenever someone said, where are you noticing resistance before? I'd be like, I don't know what that means. Like, what does that mean? When things are hard, and if I pay attention now, it literally means when I have to physically shove something in my body. Like if I have to put way more energy into something than it should, and it's because there is a electrical resistance there. Like there is almost like two similar magnets trying to like push together, where you're just like, why is this so difficult? Because there's a huge amount of electrical resistance, which probably is a good indication it's not correct. Yeah. So that's helped.
Yeah, and that's a good way to look at it too. I mean, there's so many ways when you're learning about these systems to identify what's correct, what's not, and that's how we become more sovereign and in our own unique authority, which is the point of all of this, right? No external authorities.
That's the key. That helped me. It's like you should not need all the decisions already, GNO rather than KNO.
Right.
So it is discovering how to pull that out of yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, more recently, and throughout my life, but I always go through like these phases where I revisit trauma and I revisit, the psychological aspect of it. And so I think that that's an important part too, because, the trauma that each one of us has just by existing, but then also like growing up and especially our childhood, and there's ways to see in our chart how we integrated or developed these not self strategies to prevent that from happening again, and we create these trauma patterns and communication issues and distortions around relating with people that is not truthful. Right? It's like, if I do this, then they'll do this, or it's very like subconscious, and so that part of it is also very important. The trauma and working through that, and then knowing like your attachment style, like how are you in relationships? What is this like trauma pattern that you're having? And with human design, gene keys, astrology, all these languages, now we can actually identify non-personally, like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I'm feeling, this is where my boundary is, and it's correct for you because you now know your mechanism, right? And like what you need versus like, well, I'm not sure how I should feel about that, or what if I should say something, or maybe I shouldn't say something, or like just kind of whittling yourself down and not being full, like fully integrated, fully present, fully embodied, and living out of that fear that if I'm my true self, which is what we were when we were a kid, then it's going to be punished, it's going to be shamed, it's going to be told that I'm wrong, I'm going to lose something, like whatever the things are. So
the bitterness for me has been very helpful. So that's why it's so hard, but actually practically easy to learn every day, just by your not self snapping back at you. Where if I get bitter, I'll be like, okay, and I will immediately go back and be like, what did I not do correctly? And it happens usually within the same day now, where I will know if I feel bitterness, then something wasn't in alignment with something that just happened, probably really recently. So it's been extremely helpful for just constantly reevaluating, especially if a lot of people just don't have time or don't have the habit built to do like a reflection at the end of the day, or meditation, kind of where they can process their day and see what worked and what didn't, and hone and refine. But the bitterness for me has been very useful, just as an indicator, like massive red flag, something wasn't in integrity, go find it. And it's usually not that hard. Like our subconscious is real good at collecting data, and you're like, it's probably that.
Yeah. And that's also what I mean by like the trauma stuff too, because like if we don't address that, then we can also have a distortion of how we view things. So it is important to look at your not self energies, right? Like, okay, frustration, right? So it could be one of two things for me, like either, okay, yeah, my subconscious is picking up on where it's not correct, or I initiated, or I didn't listen to my authority, right? And it can also be like a trauma pattern, of like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. Like the mind can create it. So what I find is that like, it's good to pay attention to that non-self energy and then like communicate.
Right.
And be like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm feeling frustration, or I'm feeling bitter, or whatever the thing is, and like identifying, okay, I think I need rest, or I need time, or I need whatever it is that you need. Because a lot of times we just like push through and we're like, well, I don't want to give up. I don't want them to think that I'm unreliable. I don't want them to be mad at me, think that I'm rude. They're going to, whatever. So really it's like being able to see all that, communicate, like I always put the top, nothing's personal. That's what all this stuff shows us.
Super hard. Yes, it's
so hard.
When you're dealing with people that feels personal.
It does. Well, and that's the thing I think where there's a lot of confusion too, is that just because we can look at things as code, geometry, angles, mechanically, chemically,
Yeah.
codically, right, that it doesn't mean that we should just allow and not put boundaries.
Right.
Right? It's like, no, there still needs to be boundaries. It's like more about how much of yourself can you be in each situation? Like how full can you be, how truthful, how objective, but still in tune with like whatever it is you're processing, like the feeling, right? Or the emotion, but not projecting that. And then even when you do like operate in shadow and you're projecting out, victimhood, or you're victimized, or what, or you're victimizing, that you can be aware of that, right? It doesn't go away.
Right.
None of this stuff like goes away. Like our not self doesn't go away, our conditioning doesn't go away, the trauma doesn't go away. And I think that that's a big issue with the spiritual community, with religion, the bypassing. And it's more like, hey, what can we explain about this? What can we understand about it? And how it like brought us to be what we're here to be. I mean, basically in a nutshell, it's just all about like how full of yourself can you be in every situation? How comfortable can you be with whatever you're processing, what you're feeling, what you've been through, and not shy away from like that energy in your body or any of that. So that's really, I think, the gift, and then being able to explain that and having a higher awareness of it, because we don't personalize it. So we alchemize it, which leads us to higher consciousness, and then being able to share that, because now we have a different style of languaging that is more accurate, right? Not just from trauma. And that is the gift for ourselves, right? That I believe is our purpose, right? That is what we're here to do. So, in a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, it's too broad to do in 40 minutes like this is. It's too complex. There's too much, but it's a fantastic framework for filtering. It teaches you how to read the filters, which is kind of hard to get your mind around sometimes, but you become aware that there's filters, and then you're like, oh, this is how I'm actually processing information. So if you're familiar with introspection or meditation at all, it kind of allows you to go deeper into watching.
Right.
And then you can start extracting useful things. And the key is always, for me at least, how is this helpful in my everyday life? How can I be a better communicator, or just improve my daily actions to be more myself and to be of service to other people? So as long as I can pick apart and be like, okay, every time this happens, there's bitterness every time, where in this can I just eliminate? Or maybe I shouldn't do that at all, because every single time I'm in this situation, there's an immense amount of resistance. Maybe I should just stop that thing entirely. Like if you don't feel good after doing something, obviously it's tricky if it's your job and you're dependent upon it for income. That's probably most people's big one. But at some point, if it's just like crushing your soul, or you're moving through your entire day through resistance, probably something wrong.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And then you go to your strategy, okay, so how do I make my decisions and my movements and all of that? And you go to your strategy, right? So yeah, because even the darkness, even all of the conditions that cause us to go into that dark night of the soul or crisis or the depths or whatever, is all the right environment to access truth and all of that. So yeah, there's just so much.
Yeah, for every experience, it is always the correct experience. There's always something to be pulled out. Like it's all life.
Right.
So even if something is miserable, those are usually the most ripe forms for alchemization, as you said, or those are the heavy transformative ones. Where usually people who come out of that are a different person. Like something dramatically shifts in them that's noticeable.
Totally.
Yeah, either they take life less seriously if they've gone through something that's extremely intense, they're a little more light and bouncy, hopefully, or you just see people in the pit of it,
Right.
and fully on one end of the spectrum, which is also as interesting to watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all forms.
Absolutely.
And someone's coming over right after this. So you do a lot of in-person readings, and then you do a lot of remote stuff.
Yep.
What do most people really appreciate from your business is soul mapping, and what do you think is the like really cool part that you like impacting on people?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting because when someone that doesn't know you, like I probably don't know you,
Right.
and I don't get into your story, but I can unfold, and it's not like I'm special and I have whatever. I'm not divinating, but I know how to read the filters, right? So I can translate your chart for you to bring a lot of precision to things that you may have always known about yourself, but didn't really understand or know how to work with. So I really enjoy doing that. I enjoy doing stuff with like relationship dynamics and helping people to communicate so that they can be more full in themselves, because that's something that I've been working on my whole life, and I continue every day. It's always a practice of like, okay, where am I not being completely truthful? Like, where am I not fully opening, right? And I don't want to see this. I don't want them to think I'm rude.
Every time.
That's like one of those videos, where you go to say something and it's like,
Every time. I forgot about that. I haven't missed the train.
no.
Uh,
The train wants to speak up.
the train always wants to be
Yeah.
heard. Okay. These
Yes.
don't pick up. They probably muted that, but not
Okay.
that much.
All right. Yeah, so I would say, helping people to feel more empowered with themselves is like the greatest part of doing the readings for me, right? Because people can see when I'm explaining to them about their mechanisms and why this thing is happening or how to work with this or that they're just like, oh, okay, like this makes so much more sense now. Now they have the tools, the words, and the knowing behind it and the why. And now they can go out into their lives and be more full and have that empowerment of like, oh yeah, I can just communicate this. I don't need to like keep, holding this or that back. And that's the best thing for me to see is like for myself and for other people that I work with, that as the years go on, you just get so much power from like being your full raw fucking self. You know what I mean? And it's not like, and you start to question all of these things, like, why am I doing this or that, and like, is this coming from my not self, and what is it showing me? And then you start to have all this like content. Really, it's just, amassing a library of consciousness that's unique to yourself. And now you can share with people and continue to have these experiences. So most people end up doing my quantum jump 4-call sessions, where we go into their human design in great detail, the gene keys, looking at astrology, and then a lot of people will end up purchasing the course, which originally was a 6-month course, but it's now an 11-month course.
Well, it's an indefinite course because it's an indefinite study and practice.
Right.
And you can't know all about yourself in 6 months. Like we just barely got through all of the centers and signatures and gates. Like there's so much information.
Yeah.
And like you said, like there are going to be facets based off of you that are more important, that people will be attracted to, that have more application in the cycles that they're constantly getting trapped in. So a lot of people will have relationship cycles, or this is a fantastic tool for why do I keep doing the same cycle over and over? And this is just another, it gives you things to look for.
Yes.
Be like, well, you have these, so if this happens, watch for this.
Right.
It's just it can be very mechanistic, which is really helpful for watching any type of relationship dynamic.
Yep.
It's perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you'll see Alex in the course as well. But yeah, definitely a reading is the first step. And then Alex also has some courses up on the platform that we developed the Syncretist Society where people like us and maybe can share your specialty, the languages that you're into and your codes and see how everything interweaves. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll put all the links for your hilarious meme collection and social media down below.
Yes.
And we have a group for discussing all of this, people understanding themselves, Facebook group, Telegram group, and I'll put courses and your website right below it. But yeah, I agree. The quantum jump is probably the most useful package because
Yeah.
you can't understand much about it in one call. One
Yeah.
call opens the door
Yeah.
and starts the deep dive, but 4 is far more useful just to give you practical things to look for in months. Like this is a long game. Right. So
Oh yeah, you get the download, you get the
Yeah.
reading, and then you're gonna unpack it for like
Right.
a long time, and it's just gonna keep revealing itself to you, and it's just science. It's just the codes and the blueprint and the map, and it's awesome that we have access to it. So
it is a blueprint, and that's why I like it so much. Framework and blueprint.
yeah,
Thank you for your time, and I'll let you get to your
thank
reading.
you.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast, everyone. Thanks for listening all the way to the end. If it felt a little abrupt, she actually had a client coming into the house in Asheville, North Carolina to get a reading. She is very busy and she helps a bunch of people understand the dynamics around their life quite a bit. To learn more about her, to view the courses we were talking about, her website is soulmapping.life. You can find all of her offerings there. And if you're interested in learning more about human design to be an educator or a coach, she did build a platform called courses.syncretistsociety.com. You can also join the Facebook group, and we have a Telegram channel, t.me/Syncretist Society. Follow her on social media. She is a meme queen and hilarious. Until next time.